Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's an honor to be here. It's quite nice to be able to discuss health futures, participatory medicine, and crowdsourced research studies with you. The slides are available online at slideshare.net/lablaga, and I also wrote the URL over here while we go on. So I did have that nice introduction, and the basic theme throughout my professional life has really been trying to apply emerging technologies to the problems of society. And I've been focused on doing this in the health venue for the last 5 years. A summary of what we'd like to talk about today is that, first of all, participatory health might be the right public health solution at the right time to address some of the challenges in our public health system. Second, that biology is starting to be seen more and more as the transistor of the 21st century in terms of the potential transformative power that it might have. Third, there is a proliferation of involvement in participatory medicine on the part of individuals, ranging from light engagement in social media to the more intense engagement in crowdsourced health research studies. Finally, participatory health is integral to realizing the personalized preventive medicine of the future. We'd like to stay well and work on conditions during the 80% of their lifetime before they become clinical. So here's a list of the top 10 participatory health initiatives that I'll be talking about. They're organized here in terms of time frame as to when they might occur in the next 10 years. We're already quite familiar with some of these things, like smartphone health apps, social media, personal health records, and health social networks. The next tier of technologies is coming out and being adopted by early adopters. For example, automated self-tracking devices, crowdsourced health studies, the idea of the health advisor, and personalized genomics. Finally, in the farther future, we have new concepts such as microbiomic analysis, blood tests 2.0, and whole human genome sequencing. So this talk is a play in 3 acts. First, an introduction to the context for participatory medicine, then the details of different participatory health initiatives, and finally, what the future may hold. If we think broadly about information transmission eras, we can identify different models, different paradigms. Initially, information was transmitted in an analog model. The 17,000 years ago, painting and scrolls, which then became the digital information transmission era with the advent of the printing press and then more recently the transistor. Now in this century, we've moved into a new Kuhnian paradigm for information transmission, and that is life code. The way that we're currently able to read and write DNA means that ultimately we may be able to manage all biological processes, including printing organs on demand for replacement, and in the areas of agriculture and synthetic biofuel. Of course, there'll be another paradigm in the future, but its parameters are unclear to us now. Information transmission gives way to information processing, and here too we can see different paradigms that have segmented the field. Initially, we tried to enumerate all information and knowledge in expert systems and techniques like the psych program. That gave way to more of a biomimicry era, where we've been trying to emulate the neocortical columns or the visual processing system via software and hardware. Now that's given way to the big data era, where we're finding that a large enough data corpus and running simple algorithms over it is enough to make information meaningful. Again, there'll be another paradigm in the future of whose parameters are unclear now. So how these information transmission and processing eras translate into health is that we see big data in 2 ways. First of all, here with personal health informatics, the idea of a continuous health information climate that may surround us in all situations comprised of 1 billion or more data points. These health data streams, such as listed here, would all be aggregated and mapped to constructive advice to individuals. So these kinds of data streams are DNA, certainly, both SNP mutations and structural variation, epigenetic data, RNA expression profiling, and a host of omics, ranging from proteomics to metabolomics and microbiomics. Another way that big data is being seen in the health area is through collective intelligence computing. This is the concept of every individual serving as their own computing node for processing health information through the quantified self-tracking devices that they use, continuous sampling devices, consumer blood tests, consumer genomics, crowdsourcing project participation, concierge research participation, citizen science projects, mobile phone devices used for a variety of functions, is all leading to the individual being more of the locus for data collection and processing. So on the one hand, we have these interesting big data trends of the personalized health information climate, but on the other hand, we have the challenges of the public health care system. So this chart is showing OECD country health expenditures from 1970 to 2008. And the US is unfortunately leading with spending $7,400 per person, which is nearly a fifth of our GDP. Healthcare costs are not the only problem. At the same time, populations are aging and less healthy. The CDC issued a report last week projecting that 42% of Americans will be obese by 2030, nearly half of our population. We anticipate physician and nursing shortages, and the cost per new drug is $1.5 billion. Also, less new drugs are actually coming to market. And so already we're starting to see a period of healthcare rationing. So we desperately need these participatory health initiatives to help address these health issues. First, let's look at some of the lighter touch areas, and even starting with a definition. What do we mean when we say participatory health? So one of the early formalized definitions came in 2008, where the general notion of health 2.0, medicine 2.0, et cetera, mainly meant the use of social media technologies in the health context in order to personalize healthcare, collaborate, and promote health education. That was further formalized in 2010 with the Society for Participatory Medicine defining the area as a movement in which networked patients shift from being mere passengers to responsible drivers of their health, and in which providers encourage and value them as full partners. So this can start to be seen in the wide variety of participatory health initiatives that are available, ranging from social media, mobile health apps, personal health records, consumer genomics, health social networks, and crowdsourced health research studies. First, looking at the light touch of social media, this basically means any of our huge chiclet cloud of social media properties that we can engage with, engaging with them in the health context, tweeting about health issues or using health-related websites and blogs. We have already found that the light touch of social media can increase responsibility taking in the health area. Over a quarter of US internet users are tracking some sort of health data online, a Pew survey has found. And physicians generally appreciate the role of social media in the area of shaping patient management and treatment. I don't think we can underestimate the smartphone as an important platform for health. In the US, we now have more cell phones than people. And worldwide, we expect a billion smartphone users by next year. Additionally, application growth has been accelerating, including for the 7,000 health-related apps that are also being used to recruit and execute health studies. I'll make a future point about the importance of mental health optimization as an important medical frontier, and the platform for doing that is the smartphone. We already have an intimate connection with our phones, as can be seen in that we typically notice if we lose our phone within 5 minutes as opposed to taking an hour for us to notice when we lose our wallets.
Melanie, is Health 2.0, is it primarily the developed world at this point, or are we seeing it also in the developing world?
We're seeing it all over the place, and in fact, developing world is even more of an opportunity with some of the green bank applications that provide financial services and health data collection services. People that don't have access to banking or health services on a regular basis is a sort of a greenfield opportunity where the mobile platform can quickly become involved with. So another area is the personal health record, and this can be anything from reordering a drug prescription online to filling out more complete family history and so on into your electronic health record. The key point is that studies have found that personal health record users are much better at following up on medical care and have more of a self-empowered role in their own health self-management. The next area to talk about is health social networks. So this is just like Facebook or LinkedIn, but for health contexts. People talking about conditions, their symptoms, treatments, and other kinds of aspects of having health conditions. And what's been happening now is, just as Clay Shirky prognosticated in his book regarding online social interaction, that we start with sharing, but we move to collaborative action, and that's happening now as some of these health social networks are actually communities for conducting health studies and collaborating on health-related issues. And I'll be talking about them in more depth. So the next thing to discuss is personalized genomics, and the reason that this is important is that this is the first venue where we really have widespread, low-cost consumer access to health data, unmediated by medical professionals. Specifically, what personalized genomics is using genetic sequencing profiles of individuals in health decisions. The consumer cost right now is, the cheapest is $99, ordering from 23andme.com. And this test is available internationally and has over 100,000 subscribers. So specifically let me just ask, how many people in the room have their own consumer genetic data from 23andMe or other services? So not as much as the usual Silicon Valley crowd.
You get it for $99?
$99 from 23andme.com.
You can answer this question later, but why do I care?
I'm about to show you.
Good.
So specifically, how DNA works. I think everybody is familiar with that DNA has 4 bases, A, T, C, and G. What that specifically means is that at every address on a chromosome, for example, then the address is denoted by something like this, RS1801133. At any specific location, you will have 2 letters, and only 2 letters are possible at each location. The normal type, here in green, and the mutation type, here in red. So every person in this room at this address has one of these 3 genotypes, denoting the double mutational genotype or the normal type. And then C's and T's may appear at some locations, A's and G's at others. And so you're interested in your mutational profile. There are a number of useful applications of genomics. The established ones for several years are ancestry, carrier status, and identity in paternity and forensics. The newer areas that 23andMe and other consumer genomics companies have been focusing on include health condition risk and pharmaceutical response, how you'll respond to drugs. And then there are several new areas that we're starting to work on, like athletic performance capability, your response for over-the-counter products and environments and environmental toxins, how your body may respond to those. And then in the farther future, we can imagine having predictive wellness profiling for different systemic conditions such as cancer and aging. So when you order a service like 23andMe for $100, they will send you a kit. You provide a saliva sample, and you send it away by FedEx, and a month later you can find your results online. And you will come in and see all of the, in fact, 237 different conditions the company is covering. You'll see your haplotype group information in terms of early immigration out of Africa. And you also are able to have access to your raw data file, every single address of the million SNPs that they genotype, and your own data. So you can find out for disease conditions, for example, your risk compared to the average, and specifically where you may have a mutation. Additional information is provided, such as the percent genetic versus environmental for the different conditions. Many health conditions are approximately 1/3 genetic. And then the underlying research citations that the company has used to derive the information. This is from another company, DIYgenomics, who provides drug response information. And here for me, in yellow, these are compounds for which I am more sensitive and may require a different initial dose. So for example, statins is the most widely prescribed anti-cholesterol kind of drug, and it will be very useful for my physician to know that I'm an abnormal responder to those. So this is an overall scorecard of consumer genomics services when you're considering which one to buy. Probably 99% of people buy 23andMe because it's cheap and covers a lot of conditions, and you also get your raw data. DecodeMe has very nice quality research, but it's more expensive at $2,000, and they cover only 50 conditions. Navigenics and Pathway Genomics are harder to come by, as you now need to obtain that test through a physician. And you can also join public studies like that with Coriell and the Personal Genome Project, and there's no fee for you in those. One of the things that we've done at DIYgenomics is to try to provide a side-by-side comparison of the different genomic services. These are free mobile apps and with open source software underlying them on both the Android and iPhone platform. So here, for example, for Alzheimer's disease are the 3 SNPs reviewed for the condition, my profile here in the green and red, and which company covers which SNPs, and then you can click through for the underlying references. So we had a question as to, well, what else might your genome be useful for? So it's nice to have your own data, so when you see an article like this in Wired Science, don't tell Geico you may be a natural-born bad driver. That you can look up your own type. So the article mentions the BDNF gene, which is associated with neuroplasticity, and a particular SNP, RS6265. And if you have your data, you can just do a quick query and find out what your SNP is, what your genotype is, and if, in fact, Geico might consider you to be a bad driver. And note that you do not need to share this with Geico. This is your own private data. Another thing you might want to do is investigate whether you're more of a professional athlete or a couch sitter per some different SNPs that have been analyzed here at Stanford. One of the newest frontiers in personal health data streams is the microbiome. So this is the 10 times the amount of human cells that we have on us in microbacteria. It comprises about 2 kilograms. There are at least 20 different zones of the body that have microbacteria, and we're just beginning to try to catalog these from a science perspective. Most of the research so far is on the gut microbiome, which is related to your disease risk for irritable bowel syndrome, colitis, and a variety of other conditions, how you may respond to drugs, and also your capacity for nutrient generation. And so a paper that has been questioned a little bit came up with the idea of 3 different enterotypes that all humans could be classified into according to the different kinds of bionutrient synthesis that you're more favorably disposed towards. So this is how microbiomics is being used so far, and we're hoping to actually have a consumer-based study in this area. So now turning to crowdsourced studies as the most intensive crowdsourced participatory health effort. These are studies where They're traditional health research studies that derive participants and data from a large group of people through an open call over the internet. There are at least two kinds of studies, those organized by traditional researchers but operated in a crowdsourced cohort, and those designed by people not traditionally in the health community, participant-organized studies by groups like the Quantified Self Meetup, Genomira, and my nonprofit group, DIYgenomics. First, looking at the researcher-organized crowdsourced studies, the two main groups here have been Patients Like Me and 23andMe. Patients Like Me is a large health social network with over 150,000 community members self-identifying into 1,000 different conditions. And they have a professional research staff and have over approximately 50 published papers. They have been mainly finding results in ALS, which is their flagship community, also a variety of drug-related results, and then also user experience with health social networks. 23andMe, as we just discussed, is a consumer genomics company, and they also have a professional research staff and have conducted some studies. They have over 100,000 subscribers to their service and have published approximately 10 papers. Their technique is mainly to both replicate existing genomic association studies and look for novel discovery, novel associations. They have been notable as being one of the first to do very large-scale cohort research, having nearly 30,000 controls in a recent Parkinson's study. And they are also known for having some other more recreational genomics associations in regard to attributes like hair color, freckling, and so on. So now moving to participant-organized studies, one of the main players in this area is the Quantified Self Meetup group. Is everybody familiar with the Quantified Self group? So some familiarity. And in fact, MediaX will be, I think, hosting the fall conference here at Stanford for the Quantified Self Meetup group here in the Bay Area. There are over 50 meetup groups worldwide now, and probably 10,000 people that are participating in this movement. It's growing very fast. And what it is anybody doing any kind of quantitative self-tracking with the purpose of acquiring personalized knowledge about themselves. The meetup group is a free or a low-cost monthly meeting where different people doing different quantified self-tracking projects present the data and results and thoughts and reactions of their experiments. And the areas that people are doing these quantified self-tracking experiments in include personalized interventions for depression, low energy, sleep quality. Generally, somebody's trying to resolve some issue in their life and trying to use quantified self-tracking to make it better. So another important advent is Genomira.com, and this is a local company, commercial. I'm an advisor to the company. And it's the eBay of health studies. And so anybody can come to the website and post a study. It's a simple one-page posting to put up a study in any area that you might be interested in. And both professional researchers and any individual who is interested in doing a health study come and post the study. Right now, as of May, there are over 600 community members who have agreed to participate in studies, possibly sharing their genetic data and other phenotypic data, and want to be part of health studies. There are 25 studies on the platform so far, typically with 10 to 65 enrollees. And the site is in closed beta, but from our homepage at DIYgenomics.org, you can click and get a login. So that brings us to my nonprofit group, DIYgenomics. And we are a nonprofit here in Silicon Valley. We've been around about 2.5 years. And our goal is to realize preventive medicine. We want to do this by establishing baseline markers of wellness and preclinical interventions for individuals. We're marrying or unifying health data streams towards an outcome. Specifically, our generalized hypothesis is always that one or more genetic polymorphisms may lead to biophysical condition like a blood level of vitamin B, for example, that is out of bounds. and that with an intervention, that there can be a favorable outcome. We have 7 studies currently in open enrollment on the Genomira platform in the areas of cognitive performance, a memory study in collaboration with University Hospitals Geneva, skin study, an aging study, and some vitamin deficiency studies. We had results published from our initial pilot study regarding vitamin B deficiency, where we found that, surprisingly, even in a healthy middle-aged cohort, already over half of the sample population was out of bounds, had higher than recommended homocysteine levels, which is related to cardiovascular disease. And that, interestingly also, we were able to bring that back into line almost immediately, within 2 weeks, with a basic drugstore vitamin. And that the drugstore vitamin was actually better than the more expensive version of the vitamin. Overall, we found that then, exactly as we had hypothesized, that individuals with 1 or more mutations were more likely to have initial out-of-bounds levels of the phenotypic measure, and that an intervention was able to improve this. We have 3 new studies that we're launching. 2 should launch in the next few weeks. And this is a quantified self-tracking study with giving healthy individuals glucometers and seeing what they may do with those glucometers to understand their own glucose profiles and how that might relate to diabetes prevention. A second study is in regard to social intelligence genomics, and there have been a lot of, a hot area in genomic research is the mental performance side, and whether different individuals may have a favorable profile for altruism, empathy, a positive outlook, and so on. So we're interested in replicating and extending that study together with a personalized intervention for empathy building. And then finally, a genomics and caffeine sleep study. So there have long been genetic SNPs associated with different kinds of sleep diseases like apnea. But now there are also SNPs associated with healthy sleep quality, healthy person sleep quality, as well as the impact of caffeine. So like we saw with the drug response, if you are not a normal metabolizer of caffeine, you may be even more susceptible to the influence of caffeine on your sleep quality. So that's what we intend to examine there, together with our collaborator, Takashi, who's here in the audience. So now, turning to what the future might hold, I'd like to look at both a practical and a philosophical aspect. So I think in the near future, what we'll be starting to see is how health management occurs is through these 3 layers. And the first line of defense around any individual will be our personal health informatics layer. This information that comes from our quantified self-tracking devices, unobtrusively collecting information in the background and massaging it into personalized recommendations. I think that the second tier of health management will be through peer collaboration and health advisors. So these are new ecosystem members that are going to be helping us realize preventive medicine, integrating health data streams, and helping us conduct experiments to focus on whatever the specific interventions we need for our own wellness are. And then third, the public health system is still very much in demand for its usual expertise in disease and acute care management, but much less burdened now that individuals are taking more responsibility for their own wellness. An important new frontier in the next 5-10 years is mental performance optimization. So I alluded to the smartphone being the delivery vehicle for this, and already there are many apps for mood management, trauma condition management, and our own intervention for empathy building. And we think that mental health performance optimization will be an important future area. Another aspect that is important for the realization of preventive medicine is new models for the execution of research. So in the old model, we have a traditional institutional principal investigator funded by a grant doing research upon subjects overseen by an IRB, an institutional review board, and publishing in journals. But the new model for participatory research is quite different. We may have citizen scientists who are themselves both the investigator and the participant. And so that means that a different regulatory framework may be appropriate that's not grounded in an institutional IRB, both for financial oversight and ethical review. Maybe these roles can be split out. And there are different kinds of sources of funding, ranging from patient advocacy groups who would like to engage Diabetes Association members and so on, to research foundations, social venture capital, and crowdsourcing. Some of our studies are funded by the participants themselves. And then the results may be published immediately by wiki or in open access journals or other non-traditional journals. Another practical concern is that now that we have the $100 genome, we are painfully aware that all of the other tests are not cheap. And so we need many more consumer assays, starting with blood tests, any manner of blood, saliva, and urine tests for the usual traditional blood measures related to cholesterol, vitamin levels, stress levels, hormone levels, and the immune system profiling. So what routinely comes out to be over 50% of our cost in our studies is blood test costs, because they're at least $100 per time. And if for each person that you're doing with multiple measures, you can quickly get into the hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So we're very much looking for blood test 2.0 that is a simple finger stick test that could be read at home, possibly again by smartphone. Then the other thing, of course, that we'd like is a daily microbiome profiling assay. So instead of a $500 chip that you would run maybe just once, what if you really want to see what's happening with your microbiome and trying different interventions over time? Third, we'd like to epigenetics. We are understanding is an increasingly portion of disease explanation, and we would like to be able to do these kinds of tests as a consumer, likewise with RNA expression testing. Then moving to the philosophical side, the first thing that becomes obvious is a concept of health that is expanded from how we may have traditionally thought of health as being mainly related to disease cure. Now there are a host of physical and mental health outcomes, including improvement, normalization, prevention, longevity, and so on, that we obtain by integrating health data streams ranging from the genome to the phenome, the environmentome, and so on. And we see the self as the center of action taking, together with peers and more distantly traditional professionals. There is an ontological shift too, in the sense that the old thinking is my health is my the old thinking is my health is the responsibility of my physician. The new thinking is my health is my responsibility, and I have the tools to make managing it easy. We have an epistemology study going on currently to examine this trend of the quantified self movement that I mentioned. And particularly, we are interested in whether new kinds of knowledge are being formed through group collaborations like the Wikipedia and health social networks. We're also wondering how to characterize the knowledge being generated by traditional medicine, self-experimentation, and health collaboration communities. So we talked about this top 10 list of participatory health initiatives ranged here over the next 10 years as to what may be happening when. We saw that health social networks, smartphone health apps, social media, and personal health records are already underway. Early adopters are in this middle area of automated self-tracking devices, crowdsourced health studies, using health advisors and looking at personalized genomics. And then in the farther future, some of the elements may be microbiomics, blood tests 2.0, and whole human genome sequencing. We, of course, as a biotechno optimist, I always need to be sure to mention the other side, which are the potential drawbacks of participatory health. So some of the complaints, the criticisms are that participatory health is just a hobbyist niche. It's not really a mainstream phenomenon. These health geeks are a small community. The perceptions of health by many people are that it's negative and deterministic, that there's nothing that can be done about a health situation. So far, the participation in health collaboration communities has not been large compared to other kinds of health social networks. Also, financial incentives may be required for individuals to engage in self-monitoring their health. And then finally, it's unclear how these kinds of participatory health efforts may be incorporated into public health systems. But overall, in summary, participatory health and crowdsourcing might be the right public health solution at the right time. We're seeing that biology has the potential to be the transistor of the 21st century with its transformative powers. Third, that there is already a proliferation of involvement in participatory medicine, from the light engagement in social media to the more intense crowdsourced health research study participation. And fourth, that participatory health is integral to realizing the personalized preventive medicine of the future. We'd like to stay well and work on conditions during the 80% of their life cycle that is still preclinical. I'd like to thank my collaborators and again mention that the slides are online and invite your questions. Thank you.
Marvelous.
Thanks.
Think for a moment with me about a major consequence of this in the area of reproduction.
Sure. It's already happening in the sense of genetic screening for newborns and so on.
Okay, take a step back. Men and women decide to have a child together, usually under the social circumstance of marriage.
Maybe.
How much of the consideration will be given in the participatory self of the newborn, who is the consequence of the actions of their parents?
Well, I think what we already see is that where these tests are available, potential parents are making decisions based on available information, which is sort of the same trend that we've always had. And so now there's just additional information. And certainly there are a lot of public policy issue discussions around, well, when gender is a known attribute of a potential offspring, what should that be allowed in the genetic test, and what would the social consequences be, and so on. So gender is, for example, Council is the leading pregnancy screening diagnostic, and they survey, I believe, either 50 or 100 different conditions such as cystic fibrosis, and gender is one of those areas, and other things. So to me, it's just it's the same trend we've always had. And so we will be making decisions based on this information, and it could be interesting to see a potential lawsuit from an offspring. And I think there may be examples of that. For example, that a deaf child suing deaf parents or something like that. So I think we may already have parallels of that type of situation.
Do you want to answer your own question anyway? Seriously?
No.
Other questions? Elif?
On the quantified self,
Yeah.
seems to be a buzz around that. And you can see device makers, cell phone companies. Are the big companies interested in it, or are they small companies that are just developing apps and so on? And is this a clear, is this really
Clear trend. Yes, one I can measure by the number of calls I get from pharmaceutical companies and academic collaborators, that clearly the quantified self trend is an important aspect of the current health situation. And I see that there are both startups involved in making tools there. The quantifiedself.com website itself has a tools area with 1,000 tools or listed. And so these are both from startups as well as large companies. And I think there are, and we've already seen, so there was the Fitbit from a startup, and there was the Philips Direct Life. So there were similar products, one from a large company, one from a
I
startup.
think that Nike and Adidas and companies like that would also be.
They're in there. They're in that market already. Of course, we would say from the Run, Nike Run, Track My Run app, and so on. Yeah. So it's just more and more. We're just waiting for more better sensors to be collecting our galvanic skin response and our heart rate and so on continuously.
So is there a development of new type of sensors that can do?
I think the problems are known, and some of them are hard to solve, and people are definitely working on this. So there was, I just saw a talk yesterday on one of these sensors, and I have some references for them. If you're interested, you can follow up with me. Mm-hmm. Sir?
A couple times you mentioned when pointing at the 2015 timeframe that early adopters are already sort of poking around in there. How would you characterize sort of from a sociology, income, education, Silicon Valley, how would you characterize some of those early adopters, and who's the next round of folks who can be pulled into this?
Yeah, because we're already seeing a lot of times people say, oh yes, this whole participatory health is really just an early adopter, a Silicon Valley kind of a thing. But if we notice the Pew Internet study finding 27% of US internet users tracking some sort of health data element online, we would have to say that really this is going mainstream, as well as from the smartphone penetration and use of health-related apps.
Male, female, highly educated?
Yes. So what I can speak to is, for example, the 23andMe 100,000 users. So these people are all age groups. These people are both equally distributed amongst the two genders. And there is a fairly, there is somewhat of a, it's not a homogeneous ethnic profile that has participated in the genomic testing so far. However, this is far from representative of the US culture more generally. And so the usual answer, the usual response for this is that, for example, our own efforts with DIYgenomics, as we prove the model in low-cost means with whichever groups want to participate, that enables us to validate the model and then raise funding from more traditional sources to specifically target a more representative population in the US.
There's certain places in the world where there's more interest in crowdsourcing. If you look at the Nordic region versus Japan versus
I think everybody's interested in it. It's the most advanced in the U.S. so far. But I was meeting with the dean of the Copenhagen Business School last year, who coined the term citizen science. And he was telling me that he thought the Nordic countries are even better disposed, value-wise, historically, and other ways to be involved in crowdsourcing efforts. So I think that you could argue that maybe some cultures are more disposed to it than others, but certainly the biggest effort is so far here in the US. However, we could also say that look at the over 50 quantified self groups worldwide and their rate of proliferation on every continent, and that already there was a conference in Amsterdam, there's been a conference here for quantified self, so we could point to the sort of like bar camp, perhaps, the pervasive aspect of the movement.
Yeah, I'm actually Melanie from Aalto University in Finland, and I want to thank you for a fantastic presentation.
Thanks.
Really fantastic. I have a few questions. What's actually the second biggest hub for the personalized healthcare and genomics after Silicon Valley?
In the U.S. or
worldwide? It can be in the U.S. as well.
Genomics. Well, Greenland probably is even more integrated, but it's popping up everywhere, including in Brazil. I see as another early adopter market in regard to genomics and personalized medicine. But Greenland is probably the biggest leader in terms of the leading studies, and they are connected with DIYGenomics. So they conducted a lot of the initial human genomic studies, and they have also cataloged their entire population genomically. So it's a smaller population, 200,000 people, easier to manage, and so on. So apparently there is now a genotype-phenotype database available online regarding the population of Greenland. I know in Denmark, they have, in the last 2 weeks, made available a phenotypic database, family history, anonymized family history, disease conditions, and so on their 5 million person populace, which is pretty amazing. They don't have the genetic component. The UK is further ahead than the US in the public health side. So they got going much earlier with a public biobank within a 500,000 person initiative, moving to 1 million participants, providing both a genetic sample and phenotypic data. So in the US, we haven't gotten our nationwide biobank going as quickly. So the governmental efforts in other countries have been leading. Here we have more of the commercial, more of a tradition of commercial entrepreneurial providers of these kinds of things.
When you think about this, the way you are doing your research is pretty much, open source, crowdsourced.
Yes.
Which is, I think it's the way to go.
Yeah.
At the same time, we are talking about data that's as personal
Yes.
as it gets. It's much, it doesn't matter that much if someone steals your credit card information, right? You can get it and that's it. But, how do you they're kind of extremes, right? How do you kind of see this dilemma, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so that's exactly on the what are the new regulatory models to accompany the realization of preventive medicine in our culture generally by entrepreneurial players like myself as well as traditional players. And so I think the biggest thing that we want to do is offer different flavors of ways that individuals can opt into programs, testing, and studies that is comfortable for them. So what we find is that early adopters often can be characterized by radically wanting to share all of their information publicly, preferably with their name. To the other people who are much more reticent and would prefer the older model. They're sort of worried about what may happen with their information. So I think the important thing is to offer different choice tiers and clearly describe them in English as opposed to legal language so that people understand how they can participate. And so, for example, on the Genomira site, there are at least 3 levels of participation. And one is I share my genome with anybody publicly, and mine is available that way on the web. And the second one is I'm interested in sharing my genetic data on a SNP-by-SNP basis based on which study I join. So when I join a study, I'll decide whether I'm going to share these 5 SNPs with the study organizer or not. And then the third tier is I'd like to be a discussion participant. I'm not interested in sharing any data right now. So that's an example of how different privacy concerns can be included in the same community. So I think this kind of community design is very important to easily let users understand what kinds of expectations and situations may be arising with their data. Additionally, I think that people are becoming more, it's like anything, once people understand what more what the benefits and drawbacks are of anything, that they make decisions about it. So initially, the knee-jerk is always, no, I would never share my genetic data with anybody. But then when you find out, oh, well, then your doctor may actually be able to tell you whether the statin is going to work for you or not. And so then there's a value proposition there. And so then both the provider and the consumer become more mature around what genetic technology is. But this is an important area, and there's also some important work being done by John Wilbanks, formerly with the Science Commons, in regard to a portable genomic consent. And so this would be sort of like a VeriSign, almost an escrow of your approval for participation in health studies. So if you, sort of like the Creative Commons licenses. So I say with my genome, I've permission in people generally to some certain tier. And so that's sort of a nice middle ground, a middle authority using a Creative Commons license, essentially, instead of a user, a consumer having to parse through the different tiers of genetic privacy or health information privacy. So anyway, this notion of the Creative Commons license or a portable consent that's sort of standardized is the idea. Mm-hmm.
Is there a response of the medical insurance industry to this kind of information?
Yeah, so what we have now is a law called GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and there are similar versions in Europe and the UN and so on. Geneva Convention, there's an aspect of covering genetics. But anyway, so this Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act in the US means that health insurers and employers cannot discriminate against you on a genetic basis. Health insurers can discriminate against you on a non-genetic basis, like a pre-existing condition, but on a purely genetic basis, they are not legally allowed to discriminate. However, there are some problems, like that law doesn't cover long-term care insurance and some other aspects, but there is a strong prevailing notion that we do not live in a world like Gattaca, if you've seen the movie, where some people are genetically perfect and others aren't, because each of us is at high risk for one or another condition. And so what happens is it actually helps to destigmatize, I think, some of these health issues. So if you know, okay, I'm at high risk for diabetes and you're at high risk for cancer, this is the nature of being human, so let's, it is very silly to drop people out of insurance for that reason. And so the prevailing sentiment is towards non-discrimination in genetics. Did you have another one?
Actually, yes, please. Quick question regarding, so actually I had an interesting discussion with a researcher who works in the, DNA scanning space, and their company as well. And actually she told me that, the full scan of her genome or DNA costs like, 20K to 10K to 20K.
Mm-hmm.
And even then the accuracy is somewhere like 99%, which is not enough, in her opinion, which might be true. When we get, to the situation where the prices come down, what's going to happen? Because already now we can, do pretty neat stuff with the, $100 tests.
Yeah, with the million SNPs we get with 23andMe as opposed to 3 billion in the whole human. So I think it is a big issue. Just how quickly will these costs for the whole human genome come down? For the consumer, it is approximately $10,000 or $20,000. And even for researchers ordering in bulk, it's essentially $1,600 for a whole human genome sequence. Complete Genomics locally does it. But a bigger issue even than we getting the data is what is the usefulness of this data? And so we want to use it for identifying structural variation, which we think may be more explanative in terms of disease causality. The SNP mutations only explain less than 5% of disease causality, but Mike Snyder here at Stanford thinks that structural variation may comprise as much as another 30% of disease explanation. But we need hardware and software tools for how do you even search a file that's 8 terabytes in size and has 3 billion data elements. And just the technical practicalities are challenging, as well as then what does this information mean? And so we need immediately artificial intelligence related programs to identify gene functionality of this remaining. We know these 1 million SNPs pretty well, but we have no idea about the rest that comprise the 3 billion SNPs of total human genomics. And we used to, more than 5 years ago now, I guess, you heard the term junk DNA for all of these evolutionary relics of repeats that are of retroviral diseases and so on that comprise our DNA, but nobody uses the term junk anymore because we're now understanding that a lot of these non-protein coding regions actually influence what genes get transcribed and so on. And so the science, I think the biggest bottleneck will be on this once we get the whole human genome in greater numbers. There have only, I think, less than 100 have been done from a research perspective. That may be a little outdated. But anyway, once we start to get the whole human genome in scale, the biggest bottleneck will be the science to explain what it is and how to use it. So I think that's the challenge.
So let's thank Melanie once again for an incredible talk.